Hi, and welcome to Small Town Girl with Gwen Faulkenberry. That's me. In this episode, our second inaugural episode, I get to bring one of my favorite people to this audience, and that is Dr. Glen Fenter, the superintendent of Marion. He just has a wealth of information and experience when it comes to education in Arkansas, and so I hope you'll sit back and relax and listen as I pick his brain and we try to sort through some of the latest things we're seeing and also what we would like to see happen in education in Arkansas. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited to have this conversation today. One of the greatest things about the chance to do this podcast is that I'm just blessed with so many really great people in my life, and this gives me the chance to share them with you. And so this is one of my I guess you'd say inner circle. We go way, way back to Charleston, Arkansas, where I was a baby and my parents were baby teachers right out of college. And this guy's father was the superintendent at Charleston Public Schools and hired my parents right out of college. And they both ended up teaching his kid. So now this kid is Dr. Glen Fenter, and he is the superintendent at Marion Public Schools in the Delta. And I have his resume here, and it's about 50 pages long, and there's just so much. I think I will just have him tell you a little bit about himself rather than trying to condense this, but he's kind of a big deal. If I were governor, which I'm obviously not, he would be the Secretary of Education as long as he said yes when I asked him, which he would. No, I would drag him there. He's actually married to my middle school social studies teacher, too, wonderful lady. So we just kind of go way back. We have all this education background, but Fenter's the one I go to when I don't understand something that's going on in the state with education, because he's forgotten more than I will ever know. So welcome. Thank you for being here, and welcome, Dr. Glen Fenter. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. It is a privilege to be a part of your inaugural launch. I'm sure it won't take long before you're fully syndicated and people of my stature will only have a chance to watch, not participate.
Oh, so, no.
We are very proud of you, and you are doing a great service for the state of Arkansas. You're obviously raising a voice that a lot of people are interested in, or you wouldn't be sitting in the chair you're in today. So congratulations, and it's glad to be here.
Well, thank you for that. Tell me, Dr. Fenter, I mean, you've been doing this, it looks like 1990 was when you started. That's when you graduated with your doctorate. In the 80s, you were a teacher and coach at Alma. What are you most, so that we can kind of condense a little bit of this resume stuff, because I want them to know, what are you most proud of that you've accomplished in education? Like, what are your, say biggest three things? Because I want them to know kind of who they're talking to here, who I'm talking to.
Well, I was actually working in Northwest Arkansas. My parents were there, obviously. And when I finished my degree at the university, I applied for several jobs and actually was, as strange as it sounds, offered the high school principal's job in Fayetteville and in West Memphis on the same day. I was 30 years old. My parents, my soon-to-be wife, all of my professors, all of my close friends thought it was a great honor to have a chance to go to work in Fayetteville and felt like that's where we would go. And I remember my wife telling me, or my fiance at the time telling me that, okay, whatever you think's best, we're ready to go. And the truth is I prayed about it and I felt like I needed to come to a place where I could maybe get some different experiences. Mm-hmm. And so the day that I told her we were coming to West Memphis, I remember the look on her face was, how do we get there? When can we come back? I moved here as high school principal, did that for a couple of years. And then there was a piece of legislation in the 92 session maybe, that allowed communities to take what were then technical institutes and turn them into community colleges or technical colleges. And the rub there was that there was no financial support for that effort. And we were living in a community full of farmers that was politically controlled by farmers. Because of our proximity to Memphis, we could not pass a sales tax. So we had to pass property tax, which at the time seemed almost insane. I remember the board of visitors telling me, look, we have to try to pass this tax. You're the only guy crazy enough to do that. If it doesn't pass, you're going back to Northwest Arkansas. So what have you got to lose? We started working on that in April of 92 and had several interesting conversations. I remember one evening, a presentation I made to the Presbyterian men's group, who was affectionately known as the Frozen Chosen here in Crittenden County. They said, son, you're working hard and we believe in what in your future and your potential, but you don't have a chance of passing this tax. We passed it with 76% of the vote and created a $4 million property tax that took an institution that the state really had targeted for closure, and spent 23 years trying to build it into something that could, in fact, help chart a different course for Eastern Arkansas. And in somewhere in that process, after being told that we should be closed and that there was no way to support us, we were selected by the Department of Labor as having the best workforce training model in the country. Mm. It did lay the foundation, I think, for a number of the components that have now sort of melded together and created some of the environment for economic development that exists here, surrounding the steel mills and
awesome.
and a few other pieces of the puzzle.
Didn't they bring you to Washington, D.C. and ask you to tell people how you did this so they could do it in other states and stuff like that?
We wrote a position paper for training programs to be established up and down the Mississippi River to turn it into the economic development machine that it really should be and is doing on occasion. The first time we presented it in the White House, we did it in the catacombs and had about 6 or 8 people. And actually, the story goes back further than that. I got a phone call one day, and this lady said, "Is this Glen Fenter?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Did you send such and such a position paper?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, I did." And Clinton was in the White House, so obviously we had a few people that made some connections for us. And she said, "I need you to come to Washington." So we flew to Washington, presented in the catacombs to a few folks, and really thought that was probably the end of it. Got a call a couple of weeks later, and she said, "I need you to come back." That time we presented it to over, I think, 65 or 70 people in the Roosevelt room, from every imaginable department. And then in, I believe, November of that year, the president and Rodney Slater and the Secretary of Education, Transportation, we had Fred Smith there. There were 30 or 40 people that the president called to a meeting that we held on our campus where we presented this model. And the model we were asking for was about $35 million to establish programs in Helena, Forest City, and Blytheville, and West Memphis, and in Newport. And strangely enough, Fred Smith was asked by the president to put his name on it so that he could fund it. Fred could fund it. And Fred was looking for expanded airspace in China. And I think there was a deal where he was going to get the airspace if he funded our model. And then a couple of weeks later, Fred figured out how to do it himself. And the president decided he couldn't afford the $35 million, but then about 2 weeks later announced a $35 million addition to a federal prison in Forest City. And I got a really good lesson there about what our priorities are.
Yeah.
But
well, history repeats itself, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Well, one of the reasons I wanted to have you here really is just to pick your brain in public, pick your brain like I always do, but in a public forum, so that we could share some of the things that you have learned and some of your ideas on a bigger scale. But the other reason is, when I talk about education, a lot of times I hear things like, well, Gwen, you just don't understand because, the school where your kids go is, I think sometimes people don't realize how much poverty there actually is in Franklin County either. But, they talk about how it's more of kind of like a Mayberry situation compared to what some people are going through in some really, difficult, impoverished areas in the Delta. But you're there. That's where you've had your career. That's where you've raised your family. That's where you're living your life. And you have a lot of insight, I think, about what we could actually do that would help make education better, make public education better. Because, I think another thing that happens when I'm, maybe being critical of the way things are handled now is, people think that I'm saying that nothing's wrong with public education. And it's not that at all. I mean, when you're inside of it, you have the opportunity to really see what really is wrong. So there's definitely things I would want to improve. It's just I don't want to burn it down to fix it. So I think the first question I want to really focus in on with you is, what would you say to folks who say, public education's just broken? We have one of the lowest, education programs in the state. We're 49th or 48th in the country, 48th or 49th. This percentage of third graders aren't reading. What I hear, it seems like kind of a talking point. It is public schools are obviously failing. Blah blah blah, and we have to do something. And that's usually used as like a justification for what we're seeing now. What would you say to those people?
Well, if you go back to the Constitution, our founding fathers intended in later conversations that the public schools would be the protectors of democracy. They would be the purveyors of values and constructs placed in people's lives that help them become good citizens, help them become productive members of society. Our public schools were never designed in its present form to deal with the problems that society brings to the doorway every day, to the schoolhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Those problems are not of the public school making. The problems with public schools are basically tied back to laws that are passed either at the federal or the state level by well-meaning, in most cases, individuals who believe that schools should be charged with solving problems that, again, the model never imagined would be in existence.
So what are some examples of those? Like, give some real life examples of things that schools are, expected to do or deal with, because of laws are mandating this, that really in the end are kind of contributing to, to this.
I don't want to come across that I don't think these are problems that society needs to solve, but in many cases, public schools aren't the best places to do that. But in terms of practicality, we have over 50% of our students who show up for kindergarten coming from stifling levels of poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them aren't yet potty trained. They don't know their colors. They haven't read or seen a book. They are, in many cases, behavioral problems. And all of those things go back to, quite frankly, a broken welfare system that we didn't create, but we are living with. I think it was Franklin Roosevelt that made the first statement, and Ronald Reagan followed up on it later. Our welfare system was never designed to be a permanent status. It was a transition tool. Yet we've allowed it to become permanent, and it robs families of so much that I sometimes think people don't really realize what a negative effect it's had on our culture and our society. There's something very profound about the value that a person gets when they get up and go to work every day.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
When they're taking care of themselves and their children. And we pay these people just enough to keep them trapped. And we don't have a transitional model in place that says we're going to move you out of this in an effective way. If we do, it's not working. And certainly it's a big issue in areas of higher concentrations of poverty. But there are positions that we have to have now that are mandated by either federal or state law that, again, were never imagined in the original design of a public school system. We're hiring individuals to be professional behavior specialists.
Mm-hmm.
We have autism that is exploding. We've got issues with dyslexia that probably aren't as much about dyslexia always as they are about developmental delays with our students. But at the end of the day, the amount of money, time, effort, and energy we have to spend just to simply get our young people where they have the capacity to read at grade level and or be able to process what they read.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that, and then again, there's a whole circumstance around special education. I have a great open spot in my heart for parents who have students with special needs. And there are tons of federal laws that tell you exactly what you've got to do to meet those students' needs, and someone needs to meet them. But in many instances, meeting those needs also has an impact on the other students in their classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of things that people aren't happy about. The point that I would make is that educators didn't put us here.
Yeah.
We didn't pass any of these laws. We didn't propagate any of these laws. yet we are required to enforce them, implement programs that there really aren't very many opportunities, realistic opportunities to find solutions for. You're simply, in many cases, spinning your wheels because you're not equipped, you don't have the resources, you don't have the facilities. So there's a lot of mismatch between what the public schools were designed to do, what our current structure looks like, and then the demands that society's placing on somebody to fix these problems that we have no control over.
Yes, and what I see in this scenario that is, it's just, it's heartbreaking, it's aggravating, it's maddening to me, is you have government set up these regulations and rules, and like you said, some of them are very well meaning, but we look at we put all these things on the school, and then we point to that school and say you're a failing government school, and so let's take tax money and spend it. Have some students going to private schools that don't have all these regulations, and then let's point out how much better they are than the public schools. It's that is such a sham. If you follow the whole circle, you start with the government, and then you go all the way around and you get back to the government. But somehow there's a disconnect in people's minds, and instead of it being the government schools where they are failing, it is because of the government regulations that are, forced on them. Instead, somewhere that gets lost, and you have, now the government saying, oh, well, these schools are terrible. Let's give people the opportunity to take their tax dollars to a place that's not regulated, and somehow doing so much better. How do you fix this, Dr. Fenter? What do you do?
Well, I think first we need to talk about some of the circumstances that we're in now because of this new piece of legislation. I was actually a graduate assistant for Dr. Martin Schottmeyer, who was the principal witness during the days of the Lakeview lawsuit.
Okay.
And spent a lot of time working with him and others on equity, on a fair model of providing communities the resources that they need to succeed in terms of their public schools. So if you look at where we are now, Lakeview and the legal court actions surrounding it are basically still the law of the land.
Tell listeners what that is in case they don't know.
Well, what Lakeview did was establish a model for how you generate and distribute funds from the state's perspective to support public schools, trying to keep them as equitable as possible, and trying to level out the high and the low spots in terms of the local revenue, so that you could then have a minimum standard of financial support that gave every community an opportunity to have a productive public school. For the purposes of the legal conversation, when the state passed this sovereign immunity prohibition, it really took some of the wind out of the sails of the existing Lakeview presence within the General Assembly, and so has term limits. But 15 years ago, what we're doing today would have never seen the light of day. It would have been dismissed immediately as being unconstitutional. And so if you look at where we are now, we are not headed in a direction to grow Arkansas. We're not heading in a direction to make Arkansas a better place to live, with the exception of the few folks that have the capacity to take advantage of these vouchers and actually do something with them that is productive. I think if you look today, 80 to 85% of the people accepting these vouchers have never gone to public school to begin with.
Yeah, I think it's
So
might be
we're
higher than that even.
right off the first base, we're simply subsidizing more affluent people to be able to put their children in private schools, and to many people that doesn't sound that offensive, but there are lots of problems associated with it. Number one, it's not financially stable. If you look at what's happened in other states, there are example after example of states who have basically put themselves in fiscal distress by lowering taxes and starting voucher programs. I think Arkansas's first year was about 50 million. This year it's $325 million. And
new tax dollars.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, because 80 to 85% of these people never went to a public school, that means 80 to 85% of that $325 million was never spent in a public school. It is brand new money that's required to pay for those vouchers.
It's a lot of money.
And in doing that, if you watch what's happened in Florida, in Arizona, and other states, unchecked, that's going to put the state of Arkansas in a very, very difficult circumstance financially down the road. And Arkansans are smart enough to understand there's only so much money. If you're sending more and more of it to a private voucher model, then eventually it has to reduce the amount of money available to your public schools.
Sure.
And the problem is that not every public school student, if they chose to, has the ability to attend a private school, because there's so many other things that go along with that. Mm-hmm. Even if they wanted to go, what if they don't have the transportation? What if the closest one is 50 miles away? What if you are a part of a class of people that the private schools don't accept? Mm-hmm. And there's a long list of those. The most onerous, and I think the most morally offensive part, is that they can simply tell students with special needs, we don't accept you. Mm-hmm. And to do that using state money, at best is immoral. Mm-hmm. At worst, it ought to be illegal. And I think it is. Mm-hmm. So there's no way that this model is designed to do anything that's going to help us strengthen our public schools.
Just as an aside, what do you think it is designed for?
Well, I think this is a political agenda that's being driven in multiple states under the auspices of an educational reform, but it's really about creating a new ideology, a new paradigm of how we use education to shape the future of particular minds and people and where they vote, how they vote. Mm-hmm. And the people behind it have come out and said so. There's no secret. Their intention is to see in Arkansas a third of the public school students enrolled in private schools in the near future. And the reason they do that, obviously, is that if I can hand you money that you weren't getting and let you go do something that you think you want to do, then there's a very good chance that you'll remember my group or my party or my club and want to be a member. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that we should, and I go back to our General Assembly, that this was pushed on them politically. They had, in many cases, no idea what they were passing, and today some of them are beginning to realize that they have that there were serious mistakes made that are going to have to be remedied if our state wants to have the kind of future that we really not only need but deserve for the people who live here.
So what should we be doing instead of instead of the direction we're going?
Let's just take there's several things, and these are not any particular person's fault. But when you think about the people who get named to particular boards, they're usually very affluent and wrote a big check, or they have a long-standing relationship with the elected official, and that's just the way it works. It's a part of the beast. But the idea that we would support a model that says that, and number one, I know clearly that one of the mantras of the moment is that all students can learn. Absolutely, they can. They just don't all learn at the same rate and with the same needs and the same tools and the same resources. So this isn't about being held accountable for students learning. It is about getting to a place where we can acknowledge that there are some students who require more resources to be successful.
Oh, but part of the reason this is on my mind, and that the latest thing that we've visited about was that State Board of Education meeting with the 7 newly anointed F schools. And there was something in that meeting said that was kind of appalling. I mean, there were lots of things that were appalling, but do you remember what was said regarding just even that there was a board member who said, well, what did he say? You tell me about what we're talking about people, about the different ways and places.
There was one piece of the conversation and I think that most people that have watched that video or that were there were all left there with the same sort of almost amazed,
sick to your stomach
experiences, very disheartening in many ways. But the point came across, one of the state board members or one of the school officials was talking about the fact that there's just some teachers have to work harder with particular students to get them to accomplish our goals. And that particular board member seemed to take great exception to that. It was not apparent that was an ideological premise that many of the board members accepted. And I think that should be disconcerting, because when we start doing what we're doing now, we're playing with people's lives, we're playing with communities' lives, we're playing with regional and state futures.
Mm-hmm.
There's absolutely zero evidence that a voucher program has ever improved academic achievement anywhere in the world. The National Coalition for Public Education did a study in places like Louisiana and Indiana, Ohio, even in Washington, that showed that the voucher programs are making no improvement. And in some cases, even the academic performance fell off.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, we are, and this is a whole nother conversation, there's mountains and mountains of research from people from the Brookings Institution Brookings Institute to Yale to Harvard, that talk about the fact that you can't gauge a school's performance that serves high levels of poverty on a standardized exam. There's many biases that even the best efforts don't account for.
Mm-hmm.
So we just spent $23 million building an exam, one exam, and we expect it to be the end-all be-all litmus test for success or failure within a school district, without taking into account the poverty that exists in that area.
Mm-hmm.
When we start labeling schools with letter grades. As a matter of fact, when this first was passed through the Arkansas General Assembly, the promise was very clear. We're going to use this for parents to be able to make good decisions. We're never going to hand out money based on that achievement. And now we're handing out millions and millions of dollars a year. And just as an aside, we looked last year, I think, one school district in the state of Arkansas has received 20% of that total reward fund. And they have, I think, 8 elementary schools. Each of those elementary schools received a certain amount of money in the distribution we examined. The amount of money they received perfectly aligned with the percentage of free and reduced lunch students they had. The elementary school with the lowest rate of free and reduced lunch students received the highest amount. The elementary school with the the highest number received the least. All in the same school district, all with the same administration, all with the same community support. I don't understand how hard it is to recognize that poverty has a significant impact on how rapidly we can move students forward, depending on the status they're in when they come to our door.
But this was surprising to the state board.
Well, I'm not sure yet that they're willing to acknowledge that. I know in my conversations, my early conversations with some of their folks, that was a pretty foreign concept. We're not arguing that kids can't learn. We're just simply saying that students coming from generational poverty and coming from situations where that poverty has not ever demonstrated or provided some of the things that you and I take for granted that our kids are going to experience prior to coming to school or even while in school. Those challenges are very difficult. And we're seeing now, because of this piece of the LEARNS Act that actually rewards teachers for having students perform well on the test, we're seeing a continued exodus of teachers out of the poorest regions of the state, moving to those school districts where their students have 2 parents and they've got a 4-car garage, or they've got a grandparent support structure. They know what they're going to get to eat every night. They're not having to find a safe place to crawl under a table so that they can sleep because they're afraid of being shot. We're losing teachers every day because they know they can go to those schools and make more money, as much as $10,000 more a year. Mm-hmm. My superintendent colleagues will tell me privately that in many instances, their teachers not only wouldn't come to these poverty areas, if they did, they couldn't last long. While many of the folks who are over here struggling and now being painted with this broad picture of arbitrary failure status are battling every day to pour their heart and soul into the future of these young people.
Okay, so, Dr. Fenter, I think you, me, a lot of teacher types, honestly, sort of have this kind of heart or way of thinking, or motives that are kind of altruistic. Like, I look at this situation you're describing and I think, put more money where the people are struggling.
It's in the state's interest to do that.
Well, that's what I was going to
founding. So let me answer your question. I told you can't just turn me loose. It's dangerous.
Yeah. Trying to keep you reeled in here.
If you think about it, let's take the medical profession for an example. The sickest people require the best doctors, the best support. Mm-hmm. We've got pockets of poverty in this state that have been pockets of poverty for decades. They weren't always pockets of poverty, but again, the welfare system helped create those. Back in the day, Helena, Blytheville, West Memphis, they were some of the strongest economies in the state. shifting agrarian labor requirements, all sorts of things affected that, but welfare was a big piece of it. And then if you wanted to say what should we be doing with $350 million? Well, if you want to address poverty, if you're serious about it, first thing you need to do is recognize that there's a direct connection between poverty, the educational experience they have, and how many people we put in prison. That's irrefutable. It's out there. All you got to do is look at it. It's that way all across the country. So what if we had taken this $350 million and said every school district in the state that is serving students of more than 75% free and reduced lunch calculation, which is a federal designation. What if you worked in that setting, we're going to pay you an extra $10,000 a year as a teacher. We're going to incentivize you to go there instead of incentivizing you to leave. The big gorilla in the room, and one that many of the people who I revered greatly never chose to take on because of its expense. Every one of those communities should have a state-funded pre-K. The quicker we can get these kids into a structured environment, get them into something that allows us to start shaping them and molding them earlier in their existence, the science is very clear. We're really getting them a couple of years too late in many instances. The pre-K is the answer.
Okay.
Investments in pre-K will eventually lower the need. We don't have, well, let me phrase it a little more straightforward. If we were investing in pre-K appropriately and investing in the teachers in these areas, we wouldn't be talking about building a $1 billion prison, because we wouldn't need it. We would and if we had an accompanied welfare reform package with that helped our people understand that it doesn't matter where you've come from, we're going to put you in a position to get a skill set and go to work. And there's never been a better time to do that than now, simply because of the great need for technical labor and the fact that we don't have enough plumbers, electricians, we don't have enough people with specific skills to even build a home without importing people from in many cases other countries. So if we were smart, we would recognize it. I think the Bible tells us there's always going to be poor. We're all going to be judged on how we deal with that poverty. And in our case, we've never been willing as a state to do what is really required to fix it. And it's not stuff that people make up. It's the same fixes that have occurred in other states who have chosen to invest that money in a different way than we are now.
Well, that's what I was getting at, is if, we want to do it, some of us, it's enough. Let's just do it because it's the right thing to do, or it helps people. It's a good thing to do. But economically, you're saying that economically, long term, the smart thing to do is make this investment in these communities.
Let's carry it one step further. I've lived here 35 years. I know the history of this region about as well as probably anyone. We've worked hard. When Marion Barry was in Congress, we invested over $50 million in training programs up and down this river to create the workforce required to support the kind of economic development opportunities that are just now burgeoning.
And you're talking about
we got
steel.
We got a steel mill on to the north. We got a Google mind-blowing, brain-numbing project right down the road, and we're starting to see other things come that are a part of that kind of growth. So for the first time, this region from, let's just say, Osceola to West Memphis has a chance to start to grow again, has a chance to become tax producing, as opposed to tax consuming,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
which is a part of the state's budget. All that is here. At the same time, we have arbitrarily chosen to label schools and come in, and because we don't have the capacity or the willingness or the moral responsibility to talk about the challenges these schools face and concentrate on the positive things happening. I mean, we had a kid accepted to a Ivy League school 2 years ago. Millions and millions of dollars scholarships. We've got programs that this test never evaluates, as do other schools up and down this river. But what you find is that when you come in and tell people their schools are failing and label them as failing, you begin to affect the future of those communities.
Mm-hmm.
Parents that can choose as to where they want to live, if they're coming to work for Google or coming to work with a steel mill or anything in between, they're going to make their decisions based on several different variables.
Yeah,
but the public school is going to be one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly. So why not come over here, admit that poverty is harder, admit that we need more resources so that these schools can be successful, stop labeling them as failures, label them as works in progress,
mm-hmm.
and find ways to evaluate them that are more realistic, that are more accurate, and help Arkansas grow this part of the state into something that can, again, be a positive influence.
That's the growth mindset. You know, the whole Carol Dweck, the growth mindset where it's not yet. You know, we're not. It's not that this is a failure. It's that it's not yet where we want to be.
Well, things can get better.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up, as did you, in Northwest Arkansas when there was gravel roads in Fayetteville, when nobody could get to Bentonville because of the fact that there wasn't a good road. When I moved here in 1990, the communities of West Memphis and Jonesboro were essentially almost identical in terms of population and economic development. Now they're two different worlds. Mostly because there's a university there, and there have been millions and millions of dollars invested in Jonesboro's economy, and they had a business-oriented leadership that made good decisions. Certainly, that's how we grew Northwest Arkansas. We can grow a region. You're about to see all the stuff in South Arkansas explode because of minerals that we found in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
We just have to have a will and a plan. Arkansas is only as strong as its weakest area.
Mm-hmm.
And when we allow these systems that are producing negative outcomes to continue, we're limiting Arkansas's future. If you want to see what happens to a population when you abandon public schools and abandon investment, when the affluent folks go away, leaving only those so impoverished that they can't leave, you just simply have to go to Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
Memphis is hollowed out. It has a center core that was left alone, was ill-resourced, had no level of expectation from external folks who understood what the future could look like and what would be required for it to look that way. And now a major visitor flow, Beale Street, a major tourism attraction, has been impacted because of crime rates.
Yeah.
You know, when you don't have the good fortune of getting an education that allows you to go to work for somebody and get up every morning and go again take care of yourself and your family, at some point you start to lose respect for yourself. Mm-hmm. And when you lose respect for yourself, it's real easy to not respect others. Mm-hmm. And when I don't respect somebody else, it's real easy to pop a cap. And if you want crime to stop, building more prisons is maybe there's a period in here where it's a Band-Aid, but at the end of the day, if you want crime to stop, let's change how we educate folks. Yeah. And let's make real investments in models that have been proven to work in other parts of the country. And my Lord, let's don't come in and paint people failures because they're choosing to work with populations of intense poverty that we didn't create. We're trying to fix it.
Right.
But don't tell us that we are failing because we're serving kids who have challenges.
Yes.
And that's one of the, I think Arkansas will pay for that morally one day. And why come in and gut all of these communities, which is what you do. You hollow them out when you tell them their schools are failing. Eventually those schools go away and those communities die. And then you have people that are still here you got to take care of. I don't want to take care of them. I want them to take care of themselves.
Yes. Well, I just want to say amen. You sound like, I can't decide if you're a preacher or if you're my kind of politician. Maybe it's both. Now, have you ever thought about either one of those professions?
I'm not sure I want to belong to any club that would let me in. I would aspire to think that I had the appropriate calling to do either one. I spent the last several months agonizing over the possibility of running for governor. I don't think that's any secret to a lot of people. And the only reason that I would have done anything like that is because I just think we're headed in the wrong direction. And there's lots of areas. I mean, our healthcare situation is about to come unwound. We're going to have hospitals closing. We got farmers that are neck deep in debt. And obviously this LEARNS Act it's a ticking time bomb. One of the things I think is interesting is that Kentucky, Nebraska, and Colorado, all three put the voucher model to a vote, and it failed miserably in all three of those states. Arkansas hasn't been willing to do that.
I think it would have if we could have gotten it on the ballot.
There's no question it will fail, and the longer it goes, the faster it's going to fail. A lot of public schools are insulated from it now because it hasn't yet affected their budgets. But when it does, you're going to hear a lot of screaming and weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. It's just not, there's nothing about it that is sound educational policy. It is a political, ideological movement that is driven by these far right think tanks. And let's get back to the politics a second. I can't identify with the left wing of the Democratic Party any more than I can identify with the right wing of the Republican Party. And I think most people feel caught in the middle. I think they feel trapped. And our system is broken. We're spending more time fighting with each other based on our labels as opposed to our ideas. We're not focused on taking care of the people we serve as much as we are which team we're on and how many brownie points I can gain on my team by being the most radical in either one of those two directions. And I think people they feel trapped and they're tired of it. If I could have figured out how to run as an independent and I had time to prepare, that would have been the most attractive model for me. I understand that a person in my situation can be a little disconcerting in some conversations, but I think we've got to make some changes in our country regarding our politics, or we're gonna lose this great experiment that is still the best form of government in the world. But it's a very different form of government today than it was 10 or 15 years ago, and it's not a better one.
Well, I really appreciate that, and I just think, why do you care? Why does this keep you up at night? But I mean, I feel like I can answer that, but let me give you the opportunity to answer that.
I was in Dale Bumper's driveway when I was 10, 12 years old when he came out. And he had the only outdoor basketball goal in town. And I used to sneak over there and shoot. Didn't make very many, but I shot a lot. He and my father walked out, and my dad said, he called him, or referred to him as Uncle Dale. Your Uncle Dale wants to tell you something. And he said, son, I'm going to announce for governor. I had no idea what he meant, didn't care. I just asked him to throw me the ball, and I kept shooting. But I watched people like Dale Bumpers, David Pryor, Mike Beebe, Asa Hutchison, who I respect greatly. Mm-hmm. I watched those people work hard to try to make Arkansas a better place. Mm-hmm. Right now, I see people working hard to govern so that they can leave Arkansas. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think that's a way to plan or chart our future. Our future right at the moment in Arkansas is being driven by think tanks in some underground bunker somewhere who really are more concerned about controlling mm-hmm. the government and controlling our future than they are enhancing or improving our future. Yeah. Leading to leave is not a good model. Mm-hmm. We need a plan that says Arkansas's best days are ahead of it. Arkansas's I think it was maybe Bill Clinton that said there's absolutely nothing wrong with Arkansas that Arkansans can't fix. Mm-hmm. And I believe that firmly. But
and you just love it like I do.
Well, no, it's a moral responsibility. God put you where you are right now for a reason. Mm-hmm. He put me here for a reason. I think we're all here for some purpose if we're willing to tie into it, if we're willing to connect to it. Mm-hmm. And I do feel responsible for conveying a lot of this message because a lot of superintendents can't. Mm-hmm. A lot of school people can't. They work for school boards who are bought into one ideology or the other, and they don't have the freedom I do. Mm-hmm. Were I to be fired tomorrow, I would probably live longer. I've already had one heart attack. I don't want to have another one. But my point is, you have to believe that there are people who are focused on trying to make things better for everybody, mm-hmm. not just those that are affluent enough to control what's going mm-hmm. on, not just those who have been born into circumstances that they had nothing to do with one way or the other. My poor kids didn't choose to be poor. Mm-hmm. My kids that aren't poor didn't make that choice. That's just was the luck of the draw. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, we've got a lot of work to do in Arkansas if we want to have an opportunity to continue to grow and be an attractive place for people to live and raise their kids in all of Arkansas, not just in certain pockets of affluence and influence.
Well, there seems to be a theme kind of as we wrap up here. I keep thinking about how you're talking about all of Arkansas and all of us, and how we're only as strong, as the weakest part of us, or, kind of like the body, where the body's only as healthy as the whole as all the parts are. And it makes me think about too, though, like everything that you've discussed from an economic standpoint to an educational standpoint and even healthcare. It's like there's a big picture, and it's all of us, and it's also like all the things and how they fit together. And it doesn't seem like that we have leadership that is looking at that big picture, because.
Well, like I can't tell you I can't tell you the motives of our folks that are running the place. All I can tell you is what I see. I know this. I know that a strong public school system is the best workforce development tool you can have.
Yes.
We're investing $325 million this year. It could be $500 million next year. We have no idea what those kids are learning. We don't know what we're going to be able to produce with the skills that they are bringing. We don't know what they've achieved, because again, we built this fancy test that's supposed to be, the greatest tool since sliced bread, and we're not even using it to evaluate what they are learning or not learning. We have no idea what's being taught. The other mantra that is, that's a part of all this is that parents know what's best. Well, on the surface, that's accurate. But if parents always knew what was best and always made the best decisions for their children, we wouldn't have DHS. We wouldn't have, hundreds of thousands of interactions a year between law enforcement and parents and their children. Government is supposed to create side rails and keep us all from making decisions that hurt ourselves or hurt other people without infringing on our freedom.
Yes.
When you start diverting public dollars in a state that has like every other state has some limit to the resources, something's got to give. And if we don't have a strong public school system, it's going to negatively impact our future for decades.
Yes.
The only place that it's ever been tried is a foreign, let's see what it was, maybe, I want to say Peru, probably not, don't hold me to that. But they shut down all of their public school systems and turned everything over to privatized groups. And within a decade, they were in great peril and tried to go back, and all of their facilities were in disrepair. There's just no future to it. There is a reason why we had public schools.
Well, you already see that in the communities where the schools have consolidated,
Well, just think about this. You think about Ozark America. What would Ozark America be without the hillbillies? What would Charleston, Arkansas be without the Tigers? Those schools, the county line, what would county line be without the Indians? And those are all inside jokes between you and I, but at the end of the day, those communities wouldn't be there. Those people wouldn't be there. And the people who are products of those systems, who support those systems, they live and die for those systems. They're in a different world. You have them come over here, they don't recognize what they see. I think it was, weren't the hillbillies playing in Stuttgart 2 or 3 years ago when your son was quarterback?
Yes. You were there. I was there.
I was there. You made an impression on me. After the game was over, we had Stuttgart had 7 or 8 of their security guards, their school district security guards there. One of your Ozark friends came up to me and he said, "Why are all these people here? We don't have security guards at our football games." And I said, "This is an Ozark. It's a different world. Not better, not worse. It's just different." We have to acknowledge that there are different circumstances that require different solutions. This idea that everybody's doing the same thing is insane. You have people in positions of leadership who've never been to Eastern Arkansas making decisions about schools that they've never stepped in, about people that they've never met. We want to relate it back to a business environment. How profitable is a steel mill going to be if they don't have control over the raw materials that they bring in every day to make that steel? We don't have the opportunity to have control over those raw materials, but we're still held to a standard that we should be held to, but it should be acknowledged that it requires a different set of operations to reach that same standard.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
Well, and what we're doing now with this school letter grade and labeling these schools is going to have consequences far beyond anything that anyone realizes. When you look up and an entire region has been gutted because we wanted to place a value on something that we not only don't understand, but we don't appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
The commissioner of education in Florida, when they first started the voucher program there, I have a quote where he said, we couldn't gain any traction on the voucher concept until we found a way to convince people that their schools were failing.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing here. We've created a test. And one last thing, there's probably a half a dozen different tests that we can be using to assess what's going on, all standardized and all flawed, none of which should be used when you're dealing with schools of high percentage of poverty. We just spent $30 million or so building a new test. We're not even requiring any of these voucher people to take that same test. Why do you create your own test? And then again, this is like the third or fourth one that we have created in the last 20 years. And there's lots of reasons why they can tell you why they would have created their own test. But if you were really cynical, if you really believed in the boogeyman, and that, my father was always fond of saying that there's lots of fairness in the world, it's just not equally distributed. One reason I would create my own test if I wanted to perpetuate this agenda is so I can control the data.
Yep.
So I can control what it produces. I'm not telling you that's the case, but I'm just telling you there's lots of things about this that just don't make any sense. Call it a political movement, call it an ideological shift, call it what it is, but don't tell us it's a part of reforming education in Arkansas, because it's only reforming education in Arkansas for a small portion of people, and that reform is only linked to paying them money so that they can put their kids into schools that don't include everybody else, that don't have to deal with these same problems. And what's the world going to look like if we don't learn to play together?
Mm-hmm.
We are resegregating, we're separating, we're moving ourselves apart because of race, because of economy. That's not a recipe for a good future. Other than that, I think it's pretty cool.
Well, this is not a conversation that's going to end. And I do really appreciate you being here today and sharing just this tiny little sliver of what you know from giving your life to this mission of education and to understanding this subject and doing what you can to help people. I appreciate your contribution, and I hope I would just like to see us in a situation where we had some leadership who would listen and would use resources like you and the other people who are in the trenches and who know what they're dealing with and know what they're talking about, to really help Arkansans and to give us the chance, to be the best we can be.
We're always only going to be as strong as our weakest links.
Yeah.
And if we're worried about needing more prisons, let's put some things in place that help people avoid that.
Yeah.
And another group that should be concerned about this, you don't need anything else piled on, but there are a lot of us that are hoping to live long enough to enjoy our teacher retirement.
Mm-hmm.
If fewer and fewer public school teachers are staying in public schools and they're moving to a different situation in a private setting, that's smaller numbers of people paying into Arkansas teacher retirement.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds self-serving, and it probably is. But there's a lot of school teachers out there who have devoted their lives, their hearts, their souls to this world, and they say, that's crazy, I don't understand it, I don't care, it doesn't matter to me. They better be careful, because it could, and it can.
Mm-hmm. Every vote counts.
Yeah, and if you want to do something about all this, fastest way to do that is start holding your local legislators accountable.
Mm-hmm.
Ask them if they have really thought through what this is going to do for their community.
And don't just blindly trust them because of a certain party.
Right. There'll be people tell you that they think it's fine, but make them tell you why they think it's fine. Why is it okay to spend money on educational opportunities that the state has no influence over and doesn't hold anybody accountable for, and that promotes segregation, separation, how can it be legal? And it's not. This is the next case that should be brought. How is it legal that we can tell special education students, we're using state money, but we're not going to serve you? That's a federal case that I don't think it'll probably take longer to write than it will to win. But at the end of the day, there's just a lot of this that we're smarter than this, we're better people than this, and our state deserves better than this.
Amen, brother. Preach. Dr. Glen Fenter, thank you so much.
Thank you.